What's going on, guys? Julia here with Alpha Elite Wealth, and I know I can't be the only one who does this, but have you ever wondered how much does the average person have saved and invested by every age? And what about how much income it takes to rank within the top 1% of your 20s versus your 30s versus your 40s? And how do you compare? No need to wonder anymore, because in this video, we're going to break down exactly what the experts recommend you have invested throughout every decade, the average income within every percentile across the board, and then whether or not that's actually a realistic milestone for everybody watching. But just remember, the point of this video is not to compare yourself with everybody else. However, it can be a very important measurement to keep track of, because without knowing whether or not you're investing enough, you won't be able to properly adjust your spending. One of the things I found a bit surprising is that, did you know you only need to have about $10,000 to be richer than the average millennial? These numbers get even more surprising when you start looking at the median statistics of people in their 20s in terms of how much they have saved and invested. But the first number we should look at is net worth. This is calculated by adding everything you own of value, then subtracting your debt. The number that's left over is your net worth. So what do you guys think the average net worth of a 22-year-old is? Just go ahead and take a moment, comment your thoughts down below. I'd really love to hear what you guys think. All right. Well, according to the College Investor, the average net worth is actually negative $39,000, which means if you're watching this and you're 22 years old and your net worth is zero, then technically you're ahead of the average. In all fairness, these numbers are heavily skewed by student loan debt, since a lot of young adults start off with absolutely nothing and they're not making any money and they're taking on these large amounts of student loan debt. So don't worry, guys, the numbers do get a lot better from here, although in terms of how much the average 22-year-old makes, here's where things get kind of interesting. The average income for this category is $24,000 a year. And if you want to know what it takes to make it within the top 1% of all 22-year-olds, that would be about $132,000 a year, which, don't get me wrong, is a lot of money, but it's still a lot less than what it would take to be within the top 1% of all U.S. earners, which is $737,000 per year. As far as how much this age bracket has invested, unfortunately, there's not really a breakdown of that out there. What I would recommend that would apply to pretty much anybody watching this, regardless of how much you currently make, is go and open up a credit card. And the point of doing this is to begin building your credit score. 50% of your score is comprised from your on-time history and how long you've had credit open. And it's really simple. Just go sign up for a no annual fee secured credit card and just put a few small expenses on it each month, and just make sure that you're paying off the card at the end of every month. So you want to be using it, but you don't want to be racking up credit card debt and then not paying it off. The second thing I would recommend is go and open up a Roth IRA. I can't stress this enough. I'm a huge advocate of the Roth IRA, which I don't know why anybody wouldn't be. This is going to allow you to invest $6,000 per year into an account that will eventually be completely tax-free at the age of 59 and a half. I don't really think it gets any better than that. In addition to the Roth IRA, I recommend that you start saving at least 20% of your income. It's really important to develop good financial habits early on, because as you move forward into your future, it's going to be a lot easier to carry on those good habits. And also start getting yourself invested in some markets and learn how to grow your wealth for the future, because really that's what it's about. I can't stress this enough. Now is the time where you should realistically start thinking about how much money you need in retirement. So I know this is not what most 20-year-olds want to think about, or people in their 20s want to think about, but trust me, as you're about to see, the sooner you start, the easier it's going to be. So for example, if you want your money to generate $50,000 a year without ever having to work another job in your entire life, you're going to need $1,250,000 invested. If you started at age 20, you could do that entirely within an IRA by just investing $416 a month. If you ignore this entire video and do just that one thing, you'll essentially be able to retire regardless of how much other money you save. It is so important to set good financial habits early on that you're going to carry with you throughout your entire life. I promise you, if you start doing that now, the 60-year-old version of you will be thanking the 20-year-old version of you who decided to do that now. All right, for those of you who are listening and you're not in your 20s, you're probably like, okay, Julia, that's enough. Good for the 20-year-olds or the 20-something-year-olds. But what about if you're in your 30s, which is going to lead me right into 30-year-olds with the average net worth that is probably going to be a lot lower than what you would expect. The average 30-year-old has a net worth of negative $1,050. And by the age of 35, the Wall Street Journal reports that the average net worth is $10,400. This is most likely due in part to student loan debt, making these numbers seem artificially lower than they should be. So how much does the average 30-year-old actually make? The average 30-year-old makes just about $50,000 a year. And if you want to make it in the top 1% of all 30-year-old earners, well, that's going to take you $210,000 annually. The average 30-year-old also has approximately $45,000 saved. A good rule of thumb is by the age of 30, almost everyone recommends that you have the equivalent of 1 year of your salary saved and invested. It may be a little bit easier said than done, as many of us have costs such as student loan debt when you're entering your 30s, but overall, I think if you follow these few main milestones in your 30s, you're going to be totally fine. The first thing that I recommend is that you aim to have a credit score of at least 750. This is going to put you in the best position to get a low interest rate mortgage or otherwise be an ideal borrower for anything that you need. And second, you should also aim to be completely bad debt free, which means you've paid off all of your loans, you don't have any outstanding credit card debt or anything like that. And third, keep a 3 to 6 month emergency fund at all times. This is as simple as calculating how much you need to survive every single month, whether it be for food, rent, car payments, whatever the case may be, and then saving up 3 to 6 months worth of those expenses just in case you need it. This is meant to be your safety net. In the event something happens, you have something else to fall back on. And also, I just want to say this. I do agree that having the equivalent of your salary saved up is a good base to aim for, but obviously this is going to depend on a few different factors, including your income, your student loan debt, if you were able to land a job right out of college, whatever the case may be. And I also want to say this, if you're 30 and you aren't anywhere near close to this, just remember there are a lot of different variables here and there's really no way to make a one-size-fits-all approach. We're just talking about the average 30-year-old, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that that's you. Okay, so we've talked about the plan for your 20s, your 30s. Now let's talk about your 40s. Your 40s are where things start to really take off. This is where most people begin to hit their peak earning years and all the hard work you put in throughout the last 20 years begins to pay off. The average 40-year-old makes about $70,000 per year. And if you want to reach the top 1% of all 40-year-olds, that amount would be a whopping $363,000. The average 40-year-old also has about $63,000 saved up. Most experts and guidelines suggest that you have 3 times your annual salary saved and invested by the age of 40. So I'm just going to throw some other suggestions into the mix. The first thing that I recommend is maxing out your retirement accounts every single year, whether it be your Roth IRA at up to $6,000 per year or your 401k at up to $19,500 per year. Second, you should also aim to maximize your earnings over the next 10 years. The reality is you're approaching the highest earning years of your life. You should do everything you can to make the most of it. And third, have a budget that you stick to no matter what. Even though technically this is something that you should be doing at any age, it's especially important now because even though you're probably making a lot more money, you could also be spending a lot more money. And that's why it's important to still live within your means. You need to be thinking long term here and make sure that whatever you're doing is sustainable. And fourth, you should know exactly how much more you need to invest if you want to retire by your goal. The rule of thumb here is that for a 30-year retirement, you'll need to have anywhere from 25 to 30 times your annual expenses saved up in order for that money to last you without running out. That means we should now talk about how things begin stacking up by the time you're 50. What I found interesting is that the income in your 50s doesn't really increase much from your 40s. The average income here is about $77,000 per year, while the top 1% earn about $455,000 per year. So although the income isn't a huge change from that in your 40s, at this point, most standard guidelines say that you should have about 5 times your annual salary saved up by the age of 50. So if you're making an average of $70,000 a year, you should have $350,000 saved and invested. Ideally, aim to have at least 7 to 8 times your annual salary saved or 10 to 12 times your annual expenses invested. Depending on how close you are to your goal, if you're further behind than you had originally expected, your options are really one of 3. Either retire later, invest more money, or win the lottery, which is probably not likely. You should also have a very clear date in mind in terms of when you could retire and how much money you need to get there. Again, this uses the same calculations that we've covered before, but assume you're going to need 25 to 30 times your annual expenses invested to be able to live comfortably without ever having to work ever again. This could include moving to a different location, cutting back on your expenses, doing everything you can to plan for a time where you might not be making a lot of money, but that doesn't mean you could never be working in retirement. It's all about planning for a time where you have the option not to work, and if that's something you want to do, you're able to do it. And finally, we've made it to our 60s. For those of you who are curious, the average income stays about the same, right at that mid-70s mark, with the top 1% making about $510,000 per year. Ideally, by 60 years old, you're going to want anywhere from 12 times your salary saved up. I also think it's a good idea to have your primary residence paid off by now, or if you haven't done so, at least you're getting a little bit closer. This is going to give you a lot more stability in retirement by having a fixed cost for housing. This will allow you to have a paid off asset that you could sell in the event that you ever need money, or maybe you just want to downsize. This is also the age where if you want to, now is the time where you can begin withdrawing from your retirement accounts without any penalties at all. You can also begin collecting Social Security as early as age 62, which could definitely help offset some of the numbers that we talked about. And really, from there, the rest is up to you. Obviously, all of this is just a rough ballpark, and some people could be way ahead of this or way behind this, but that's not what's important. It's more important to realize that now is the best time to begin working towards these goals and showing you that the sooner you start, the easier it's going to be. Even if you're not as far along as you think you should be or you'd like to be, it all starts small with budgeting, saving your money, investing consistently, and most importantly, hitting the like button and that subscribe button so you receive notifications anytime I upload a new video. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.